As the world continues to move forward, a lot of people are still considering the possible career of being a programmer or a developer of some kind. And while one can make the conjecture, the guesswork really doesn't help. So I figured, why not speak directly to an iOS developer, an independent iOS developer, who has made one of my favorite apps called iX2P, as I call it, but it's actually called Infinite X2P. Now, what it does is it unlocks the iPad world itself. It's no mystery to anyone who's used an iPad that it's nothing like an actual computer, even though the marketing says that it is. But what if it could be? At least when it comes to productivity work, from emails to writing docs, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Infinite X2P has actually been able to do that. And Joonwoo Kim has actually made that possible. So here's an episode looking at the realities of what it means to be a developer, developing for iOS, and the challenges that come with it. Without further ado, Joonwoo Kim. I am super stoked to have the first iOS developer on the show. Joonwoo Kim, he is one of my favorite developers. Before we even get into this and I introduce him, I just want to let you know that the Infinite X2P app is absolutely one of my favorite applications. If you haven't downloaded it and you have an iPad, before this conversation even starts, download it so you can mess around with it while you listen to this conversation. With that said, Joonwoo Kim, thank you for coming to the show, man. You feeling good today?
Thank you for having me. Yeah. How about you?
I'm feeling good, man. Honestly, I'm excited. Every single guest that comes on this show in particular, I host a lot of different shows, but this show in particular is handpicked by me. And I'm very grateful to each and every guest because for me, this is going to be my life's work. I hope to one day leave behind, as I explained to you, a place where people who consider career changes or starting careers will come here. So with that said, because you are an iOS developer, I want to know your favorite memory of like, when did you first realize I might want to be a developer? Was it a Apple product experience or was it a coding and programming experience?
Well, it actually all started since I was grade 2. I was just messing around with the computers and I'm not too sure. Some kind of interest kind of sparked inside me to like deep dive into the computers. And I kind of asked around my dad if he could teach me about some computers. And yeah, that's where it all started.
And these were Apple computers?
No, those were not Apple computers. I actually started with PC.
So when did that transition happen for you where you go, forget PC?
So in 2000, I think it was 2013. Yeah. My friend asked me to, start an iPhone development because he saw like what kind of future prospects I have. And, I asked my parents if she could get a Mac and probably so that I could start on the Mac and iOS development. And in 2015, my parents bought me this 2013 27-inch iMac so that I could start on the development. And ever since I got that Mac and just tried to build some kind of an app, I never looked back.
Everyone talks about, okay, I want to make an app, right? Yeah. And then you look at the fact that you're going to have to learn coding. In particular Swift or what have you. I think some things I know this is a sin, but some people do learn React and React Native. But I know the running joke is nobody likes that. What was your experience like? Because it's not just, I want to make apps and then you just, click and all of a sudden an app is born. Did you have to learn programming first or did you learn while making an app?
I learned while making an app. It's one of the rare cases where, people usually just learn about the coding first and then move on to making apps. But for me, I had this specific app that I wanted to make, which was, so I think it was in 2015. So there were a lot of slow iPhones on iOS 9. So I just wanted users to have an app that would make some actions a bit faster. So that was my goal at the time. So I kind of wanted to make that. So as I was developing that app, I was looking into the internet on what I could do to implement some kind of functionality in Swift. So that's kind of a process of how I learned.
Really interesting. So you have this. Is it because you already knew this is what you wanted to do that you were learning any kind of coding or programming beforehand? Like, is that when you first started learning any code at all, or did you have some code experience before that?
Oh, I had a little bit of coding experience beforehand.
Okay, and it was like HTML or CSS, or what was it?
It was Visual Basic.
Visual Basic, right? Because you were using PC, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Since I was grade 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Interesting. What was that like? Because I just want to get into the mind of is it because it just made sense to you? Like, oh, this is how computers work and I like this? Because I'm trying to get to the core of like that spark, right? Or was it just like, oh, this is fun. I'll see if I keep liking it.
Actually, I was just having fun with working with computers, and it was actually my dad who just pushed me into the programming space at the time.
Did you build any application on Visual Basic?
I did. It's kind of a similar idea as Infinite XP too, but like in my young mind, I just wanted to make something that would look similar to Windows, because I just wanted to make an operating system like a Windows, right? Because it was just fascinating for me. So those were kind of the programs I made back in the days. That's
big news, though, to know that you already had that vision even from then. You said, wow, what is this operating system, or what people in Linux call the GUI, right? The GUI.
Yeah.
Right? Like I tried installing Linux once and then realized there's so much to computers that is done automatically for us that you have to do yourself in Linux. I never went back to Linux ever again. Oh, man, that's why I love Apple. So then let me ask you this, because Infinite X2P is quite literally one of the most fascinating applications I've seen in iPad, and the accessibility and capabilities it opens for people is, everything that somebody needs on an iPad to make it their only computer. The thing is, though, you did a lot of this on your own, and you've worked with many other people to try to get them on the team to be a part of it. And not everybody shares the same work ethic, the same vision. So what would you say has been the hardest part about developing an application like Infinite X2P?
The biggest thing about Infinite X2P is that it's quite a big application to be built, right? So I knew for sure that I would have to work with a few different people. And during the process, the hardest part was actually having people do their work. I knew what I was doing, and I really love developing apps, so I was investing my time into it a lot, but that's not necessarily true for the others. So I try my best to engage them into the development so that they could have some kind of an opportunity out in the field in the future too. But
because it's literally an entire operating system within iPad. And to have that under their belt, like on their GitHub or something like that, would be like such a milestone especially for entry-level iOS developers. I'm shocked that they didn't see that vision. Now, what's interesting about iX2P, as I like to call it, but it's Infinite X2P, is that it's got great design. It's got great design. And we haven't even covered like where you got that from, because it's one thing to code, and it's another and program and develop an app. It's another to actually do it with great design. Where did that come from for you? And how important is it for an iOS developer or any developer for applications to really understand design?
Since you use Infinite XP, you know that it kind of adjusts its height and width, right? According to the context it's trying to show. Yeah. So that's kind of what Dynamic Island does. And I kind of got inspired from that. So I put that into the taskbar in the Dynamic Island. You also asked if it's important to be good at designing for iOS development, right? Yeah. In the Apple ecosystem, right? Design is at the core of like every product. Like the iPhone has very good design, and iPad too. They have all kinds of some aesthetics. So understanding those design principles and creating visually appealing and user-friendly interfaces is pretty important, right? Because it has to complement with the aesthetics of the device. It also elevates the user experience to a whole new level when the application has a good design. So do you have any advice for anyone that's thinking about maybe becoming an iOS app developer, and sort of how they should consider what they're going to be developing? Because,
You don't want to make an app that somebody else already made unless you're just practicing. So how do you decide, like, you know what, this is something worth making?
There are a few categories, right? One is taking advantage of the new hardware and creating something new out of it that would improve someone's some kind of existing functionality. And the another one is solving a real world problem that users having while they're using the device. So I think those are the two routes that the newer developers should probably look into. Then that would increase the success of the chance of their success by a lot. And I think it's also important that as you develop those apps, I think you should also kind of log your progress and the process on the social media so that people can kind of notice you, right? And that way you could implicitly advertise your app too, right? That also raises the chance of the success of their career. Yeah, those are the top three things that I would tell them.
Got it. Yeah. And when it comes to marketing, which is a whole other skill in itself, right? Like being an indie developer is just one of those things where there's so much you have to be responsible for. And like you said, right now, we started covering the idea of build in public so that people start seeing what it is you're building, which I think is solid advice. Then you've got to find a way, once you've built the product, to get it to people. So far, what have been the biggest challenges you feel you've had to overcome to get adoption of your application to happen, no matter how gradual?
Okay, so the biggest obstacle of the creating marketing materials is probably making these materials look good, right? So I had one of these I asked one of the developers who's pretty good at marketing to create a app store screenshots for me, and they came up with their ideas, and I looked into them, and it was completely different from what I would have made, right? So I think the obstacle is probably you should probably have a different person look into the marketing materials rather than yourself, if you want to maximize the effect of those marketing materials as much as possible.
That's great advice. And that's another thing we didn't get a chance to talk about. How important is it to create great screenshots for the App Store? Did you see a drastic improvement once they were sent?
Yeah. Infinite XP didn't originally have the consistent downloads when I posted my screenshots. I think the new screenshots that's currently on the App Store, I think it contributed a lot to consistent downloads because it looks good and it's crystal clear of what each of the screenshots are trying to tell.
And now let's bring this sort of to a close here. If you had to say just one thing to anyone considering a career in iOS development, what would you say to them?
I think I mentioned this before. Make a record of what you're developing on social media. You need to take full advantage of social media by posting what you're working on, so that you're implicitly advertising your app. And it's also important that you also talk to different developers to get suggestions and also hear about the experiences they had in the past. That really helps growing as an iOS developer more than you would imagine.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And now, if you had a choice and people who were listening, let's say were maybe already senior developers who wanted to learn about your story and this and that, and they were asking, I wonder how I could help this person, this developer who's, doing great work. What would you say is your number one way that people could help you, whether it's downloading the application, take it for a spin, or introducing you to someone? Like, what would be what we call your call to action here?
If they want to reach out to me to help, I think the best way is directly contributing to the projects that I'm working on right now, because there's a lot of workloads that I put myself onto, which is just growing. So I think getting direct help on making those projects true to life would be very helpful as of now.
Right on. And now, where can people connect with you if they want to get to know more about you, what you're working on, and things of that nature? Like any channel in particular you prefer?
they can connect me through Twitter. So my Twitter user ID is at iOS_app_dev. So they can reach me out there, or they can also find me on LinkedIn, Joonwoo Kim.
Right on. All right. Listen, I can't thank you enough for coming through to the podcast and sharing some insights. I know they're a hard one. And honestly, I'm very grateful that you made the time, because I know you're fully committed to developing your applications, and I pulled you away for just a little bit to sort of start talking about this and letting people know what you're doing. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me here.